Okay, today, have you ever wondered if it's possible that you could save so much money on your taxes that you could move to a tropical island in the Caribbean? Well, you can. My guest today is Trevor McCandless. I'll tell you more about him in a second, so stay tuned.
Welcome to the Smart Business Revolution podcast, where we feature top entrepreneurs, business leaders, and thought leaders and ask them how they built key relationships to get where they are today. Now, let's get started with the show.
Hey, John Corcoran here. I am the host of the show. And you know, if you've listened before, every week we talk with smart CEOs, founders, and entrepreneurs from all kinds of different companies. And if you look at the archives, we've got Netflix and Grubhub and Redfin, Gusto, Kinko's, lots of great episodes for you. So check those out. And this episode brought to you by Rise 25, our company where we help businesses to give to and connect to their dream relationships and partnerships. How do we do that? We do that by helping you to run your podcast and content marketing. We are the easy button for any company to launch and run a podcast. We do three things: strategy, accountability, and full execution. And if you want to learn more about how it works and check out our new platform, Podcast Copilot, you can go to rise25.com and learn all about it. All right, my guest is Trevor McCandless. He's the founder and chief entrepreneurial officer at Fusion CPA. He's over 20 years of industry experience in accounting and financial services. He has a BA in accounting and a master's in taxation. And he founded Fusion CPA, which now employs about a dozen CPAs and specializes in tax and compliance and planning. And fun fact, cool story, grew up partly in the Caribbean and decided that he, a few years ago, was going to move his family down there. So now he's joining us from Puerto Rico, where he is raising his young kids. So we're going to hear about how he went about that. Trevor, it's such a pleasure to have you here today. But let's start with that story about you growing up on a sailboat. So your dad was a boat builder, and your family lived in part, or maybe entirely, aboard a sailboat, and eventually cruised down the U.S. coastline, the East Coast, and spent a lot of time in the Bahamas. That sounds like a pretty crazy childhood.
It was definitely unique. Kind of like the unique childhood I'm giving my kids right now living in Puerto Rico.
Yeah.
Yeah, we were in Virginia. My dad was in the Navy, and when he exited the Navy, he saw that the quality of boats was they didn't have boat builders in the Virginia area didn't have the quality of equipment that the Navy did. And so he took some of the ideas that he had there and started a boat building business. And eventually, yeah, we boarded a big steel hold sailboat, which was his specialty. So if you hit a reef, your boat's not going to sink.
Mm.
So we sailed the East Coast down to the Bahamas and lived in the Bahamas for a little while until my parents ran out of money.
Mm.
And they, oddly enough, they met in Puerto Rico a long time ago when they were in the Peace Corps.
Oh.
And so we always have the kind of Caribbean and the Southeast kind of in our family vibe. But when they ran out of money, then they sailed to Jacksonville where they got some teaching jobs, and we lived in a marina for a while until
Was it
they,
you? Do you have any siblings?
yeah, an older brother, 4 years older than me.
And how old were you, the two of you, when you were going down the Bahamas?
That's a good question, man. I do not know the exact age. I mean, I've got plenty of pictures. I mean, when we were living at the marina, I could ride my bike to elementary school.
Okay.
So, we were still little kids, right?
Okay. But you remember this sailing down to the Bahamas? You were old enough to remember it?
Snapshots,
Yeah.
right? Definitely like memories of, playing on the deck. But I was a little tyke still. I mean, there came a point where it's like, okay, the kids are getting big enough. We need to actually own a house. The sailboat's not gonna cut it anymore.
Not gonna cut it, yeah. And so you grew up in Jacksonville, and then you in elementary school started buying pens in bulk and staples and reselling them to classmates. How did you get that idea?
Well, I had to pay for my baseball card hobby. You
As
know,
one does, as one does. I can relate.
right? And how are we
Yeah.
going to get that? There wasn't much of an allowance going on, so it was like, okay, how do I make some cheddar? And
Yeah.
so, yeah, my mom and my dad, they went into education, right? So they were both teachers, and they go to Staples, and I'd tag along, and I could buy things in bulk or whatever the department store was there, and resell it to kids in school. So it was kind of a natural progression,
Yeah. You ever
of
get busted by the teacher or the principal?
Um, I think in middle school there was a point of like I had to lay low on flipping Coke cans and
Coke
lollipops,
cans, Coke cans, not
Coke
cocaine.
cans,
Yes.
lollipops, all the sugar stuff.
Yeah.
There was a point I had to lay low because it was kind of known, but not necessarily approved.
Yeah, yeah. I interviewed one guest who started doing that and then eventually built like in the front of their house in their foyer area, I guess, would like a candy shop basically. And people would, this is before the internet, people would come to the house, kids in the neighborhood come knock on the house door and like to buy candy. And it got so extensive and got so well known that the town eventually shut it down.
What?
It was basically operating a candy shop out of his house. But
I
it's
love it.
crazy how, the message we're sending to our kids, because I've interviewed so many people that where kids show some enterprise and they sell stuff to their classmates, and then eventually some teacher, some principal shuts it down. Yeah, I have real mixed feelings towards that. And on the one hand, you can see how it could be disruptive. On the other hand, it's like, why are we penalizing these kids for showing some, ingenuity?
Good point. Yeah, fortunately, I didn't get officially shut down, but there was a point I feel like where it wasn't, probably late eighth grade or something like that, that it was just wasn't cool anymore, to
To
be
sell
flipping.
candy. Oh yeah. Yeah.
Exactly. So there
That's a
was
problem
some
too.
point
Yeah.
where it's like,
Hmm.
all right, I'm gonna have to, oh, and then you like mow lawns,
Yeah.
the next progression of let's stop doing the sugar products, let's just kind of mow lawns and do that kind of stuff. And so I
Now
think
with
that
the lawn mowing, was it always you doing it, or did you eventually hire your friends?
I wish I had gotten some teaching from somebody to figure out a staffing way of doing lawns. I would have made a mint, but no, it was just me. Like my mom would just drop me off at, whoever's job it was, whoever's yard it was, and then pick me up like, a half an hour later.
Yeah, but your parents didn't have a lot of money, so there definitely was a yearning to make money in you.
Yeah, pretty much. I mean,
Yeah.
that was kind of, I think it was one of these things that was just self, driven,
Hmm.
to kind of, have some kind of, cash in my pocket so I could do the things that I wanted to,
Yeah.
without having to hit up mom and dad all the time, which, nobody ever wants to do that.
Now, what drew you? Because what drew you to studying accounting, studying
Yeah.
taxation? You eventually get your your master's in taxation,
Yeah.
but you straight from your bachelor's degree was in accounting and
Yeah.
taxation. What attracted you to that?
Well, I think it was a combination of things. Like me and my brother both went to the University of Florida, and as he was graduating, he was a microbiology major. He couldn't get a job, and came back to live at home while he was still searching for a job. And I was like, well, I don't want to be in that position,
Mm,
right? So,
hmm.
it was kind of like what other line of major would lend to the entrepreneurialism, et cetera. And then my dad kind of suggested accounting, right? And he was like, listen, accountants always get jobs after college. And it was like, okay, let's think about that more. And accounting is the foundation for business. And I love business. I love entrepreneurialism. And so I kind of really dove headfirst into it and loved it, man. Like I remember in the dorm in college, I was like recruiting other people to come into accounting. It's like, what are you thinking? Go and get your law degree. Let's do accounting, baby. So
Yeah.
I was successful. And actually, one of those dudes that was he lived across the hall from me in the dorm. He went and worked for a big CPA firm, and then I want to say like 7 years ago, he called me up. He's like, I'm ready to start my own firm, and now he owns his own firm in Jacksonville. So it's kind of cool. I recruited
Yeah.
him into the profession in college.
Now, I have to say, I've met lots of accountants, lots of CPAs. It tends to attract people that are not as boisterous as you. You have more personality. You're wearing a Hawaiian shirt. You're coming into us from the Caribbean. You have, I could tell that you have the gift of gab. You must have been a bit of a black sheep in the profession from early on. Did you ever feel that way?
To some degree, I think I know a boatload of really awesome accountants with personalities. Maybe they get stuck in a bigger organization where they just don't get as much of a voice or an opportunity to show their personality. There's definitely that other side, right, of accountants, right? That like you see on there was a show last night that we were watching. They were just, making fun of accountants, and my
Yeah.
wife loves
Yeah.
loves when that happens.
Yeah, well, I can relate to that because I, have been a redhead from a kid. And when I was a kid, the redhead was always the nerd and the dweeb in every single depiction, in media. So
Interesting.
yeah, so it's
Yeah.
fun, but it's funny. That's just the way that they're portrayed. But sometimes these things become they kind of get drilled into us.
Well, and
Um,
sometimes it is very much reality as well. I mean, there are a boatload of accountants that there is a personality set that is attracted. You may be introvert, more analytical, and they're phenomenal accountants. I've got a couple of those individuals on my team, and they have a place. We
yeah,
need those individuals that are really love getting into the weeds of tax law, compliance and stuff. And I got to have them. I did that
right.
for a while, and I was in the weeds, and now I'm able to, for our organization. We've got about a dozen CPAs and 25 total people on the team. But I'm able to these days be the position at the firm of leading strategy vision. I also do final sign off on tax returns, but that is best for our organization with my personality. So I'm not just in the weeds like I was in his first couple of years.
Yeah. And, when you talk about, going into being an entrepreneur, having the ability to, be personable, to do client relationships, and also have that deep substantive knowledge, that can really be a superpower.
100%. I
Yeah.
absolutely
Yeah.
love it. In today's day and age, too. I mean, here's the thing about tax specifically, accounting doesn't evolve as much as tax does, but with every new Congress, with every new administration,
It's
and both at the
changing.
federal level and the state level, it
Mm,
changes all the time.
yeah.
But to answer your question of like, why did I also go into accounting? I had this inner confidence that I was going to be successful. And specifically in tax, I wanted to know if I'm successful, how do I optimize my tax world? That's just kind of,
Yeah.
I'm a short-term thinker, mid-term thinker, and long-term thinker, right? And so there was that self-serving benefit in getting into accounting and tax as well, is that I wanted to optimize it for me,
Yeah.
And so I would ask questions at the first CPA firm I worked at. I was there for 4 years. Um, I would ask questions that nobody else at my level was asking because I wanted to get deeper. I wanted to understand the numbers, why this company was profitable, why it was losing money, why real estate is a good sector, why commerce is a good sector, understanding margins. I was just super freaking curious. You
Yeah.
know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
I wanted to know this for me.
Yeah.
And then the tax side of things as well. And so that's kind of always drive me in everything I do, whether it's diving into family businesses and stuff, it's because I want to know it for myself, right? And many times with our clients, I kind of lead a little bit that I've already gone through, the trials and tribulations of accounting, the tax, the finance, the family stuff. And I'm
And
speaking from hands-on experience,
and entrepreneurship too. So
Yeah,
you
100%.
started a corporate event nationwide golf club rental venture. Talk about that.
Man, I love that company. I was probably like 24, 25. I don't know when I started. That was the first business I started. I was getting my master's in tax at night at Georgia State, working full time during the day at the CPA firm. And I'd read, or was reading, doing all this at the same time, Tim Ferriss's 4 Hour Work Week,
It's so funny it's so funny you mentioned it. I just was
no way.
I just had
Look
it.
at it.
I was just
I
talking with
love
someone
it.
about it earlier today.
It's crazy. That thing is, it's like the book The E-Myth. It's one of these legendary books. But no way,
Hold
you
on.
got that too.
This right here. Right here. I mean, these are the most important books, right? They're
Yeah,
right
look at it
here.
scaling up, dude.
Yeah.
EOS traction.
Yeah.
You got a shelf of
Traction,
just legendary
traction's right
books.
there. Traction's right there. Yeah.
Bingo.
Yeah, these are the most important books.
Yeah, and so that was such a freaking awesome business. Yeah, so I dove into that. That's why I was at that firm for 4 years. I
You're
finished.
working at a firm, you're
Yeah,
getting your master's in tax at night,
yeah,
and you start this company. You
yeah,
must have been a
man.
busy guy.
Man, that's all that energy in their 20s, dude. It's like
Right.
it's relentless energy,
Yeah.
But yeah, we got up to 30,000 bucks a month, and that's when I quit that firm. But it was fascinating. Like I would go everything I was executing within that rental company, I was then, taking to my professors in multi-state taxation and saying, listen, do I have Nexus in Oklahoma? Because I just rented 30 sets of golf clubs here and I'm
Hmm.
diving into multi-state tax law for myself. You know what I mean? Even way more depth than some of the clients I was working on. But yeah, that
Great,
was
great way
weird.
to
So
learn
then
it. Great way to learn this stuff, right? Yeah.
yeah, dude, I
Yeah.
had to. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? Sales tax compliance, income tax compliance, S
So
corps,
at your peak,
everything.
how many, like, I don't know, how many bags of clubs did you have, and were they all deployed all around the country? Are you shipping them? How did you
I
get these
we
bags
were
of clubs all over the
shipping
place?
there's a lot of different models in every business, right? But like we were shipping them all from Atlanta. We had about 300 sets of golf clubs when we'd have a bunch of different tournaments going on nationwide. There was another competitor, but friend in Texas. So we would kind of work on deals together, lots of lessons learned there and, helping. Like I started with my brother lent me 5,000 bucks. I didn't have the money to, get 300 sets of golf clubs. So
Yeah.
I remember the first big deal we had, it was Rolls Royce. They wanted 30 sets of golf clubs. I had two. And I had 30 days. And I was like, yeah, we can do this deal. And then I was calling up all the golf courses saying, hey, can I borrow some of your golf clubs?
Wow.
They're like, no. Calling the manufacturer saying, hey, I got this big deal. They're like, no. And
Ugh.
I was just losing it. And so
I mean,
I
that's
tried,
thousands and thousands. I don't know how much that much that's thousands of dollars
oh,
of
yeah.
clubs. Yeah.
Yeah, tons. And so, that's when you start to, in any business, if you don't necessarily have the resources internally, you might, hey, another CPA firm, another whoever it is, golf company, can we team up on a project while we're trying to grow ourselves and we can split revenues, all kinds of different ways of being resourceful when you don't have the cash,
Yeah.
So with that, it was just reinvestment, buy more clubs until it was all profit. And I'm not a big debt guy. I hate debt. I know there's a place for it. And specifically real estate, tech, et cetera. But in small businesses, a lot of them you don't need debt. So,
So
anyways,
you
lots of ways to skin the
you grew
cat.
carefully. So you starts in 2006. I believe you said that you finish your tax degree, master's in 2008. You also go full time on that, and we
Yeah.
also had kind of the economic downturn around that time period. How did that economic downturn affect the business?
Yeah, I didn't know what a recession was. And then, when that downturn kind of was hitting, obviously corporate golf events got axed big time.
Yeah.
So boom, market went to zero. Competitors calling me, ones that had raised private equity. I'm looking at their balance sheets, massive amounts of debt. It's like, I don't want your company.
They're calling you because they wanted you to buy their company.
Exactly. They want to
Um,
just they want to exit,
got it.
and then you saw lift up the skirt. What are you really made of? You're just
Yeah.
massively financed. Interesting time. But
But
so,
you because you were careful about debt, were you okay, or did you just go
oh yeah, no, I was
lean? What
totally,
you
I
were
was totally,
fine. You were
yeah, I was
fine.
totally,
Okay.
but there was no revenue coming the door.
Which can
So
only it does that's a problem. Yeah.
I was
Yeah.
totally fine in that I could just go get a job at a CPA firm again. And that was the really weird thing about quitting to entertain the venture was part of my identity was to own a CPA firm. And so I had this battle going on how I was going to kind of go with that, but I want to go all in on the golf thing. But so when that happened, the recession, I went and joined another CPA firm for 2 years. And that's really where I then felt and gained the confidence of I could take any tax project that was in my lane from A to Z, manage everything I needed to manage. And so that's when I started my own firm 2 years after that. So I only worked at two firms and I was about 28, I guess, when I started my own firm.
So actually, I think I was around that age, maybe 30, 31, when I started my law firm. And
Okay.
you sound similar to me in the sense that I felt a little bit of an insecurity when I was starting it because, these days most people will work at a larger firm for a longer period of time, maybe 5, 10 years before starting their own legal practice or accounting practice or whatever. Did you feel that when you were starting? Like, maybe I'm a little young to be doing this or anything?
Um, Man, well, yeah, so like there was a point where, do you stay at that CPA firm? Me and the partners were not seeing eye to eye. There was no going forward, right? And that is what helped me to say this, I'm giving it all a go on my own. If they were really cool and nice people, that would
Yeah.
have been a lot
Yeah.
tougher. Um, but that was not the case, and
Yeah.
so that I thank God that's how it all rolled out. That I just said launching, I'm going,
Right.
because then if they were more amenable, then it could have been like, do I want to be partner here? Next thing
You
you
know,
know, 5 years later.
sometimes I think the worst thing that can happen to you is for everything to be just okay. Because it's not enough to light a fire under
So
you to
true.
go quit that job, to start that new company, to take a risk, take a gamble, go back to school. If everything's just okay, it's
So
sometimes
true.
it's a real blessing when you have an a-hole for a boss or a bad working condition or you just hate the job because then it actually lights a fire under you to do something
A
about it.
real triggering event
Yeah.
sometimes you need.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So you started Fusion CPA, and then there was a point at which that you were simultaneously, I guess you'd started back up the golf club rental company, Fusion CPA, and you also had a hand knit 3D animal scarf business, which came from somewhere. What was that idea?
Yeah, dude, the 20s, man. The 20s were just unlimited energy. Yeah, like, I'm very creative dude as well. Like I'm in the middle of writing a book right now and I like to bring things to life, bring ideas to life. And there's this like my friend's grandmother had knit this like again, I went to the University of Florida, and the mascot is the alligators, and so she had knit this three-dimensional alligator scarf. It was so cool, and I was like, I'm gonna have that mass produced.
Hmm.
And knit and everything, and then I was like, I'm gonna do it for every school in the college arena. So I did that, had some patents on these things, and started to get collegiate licensing. But then that was another, all these have good learning events or learning situations. And that's what I realized is like if you don't have nationwide distribution, you're trying to sell to mom and pops left and right, you're never going to make it.
Mm.
You're not going to get the profitability and the infrastructure you need. And I never got to that point. And then also the licensing people were calling me up and saying, "Hey, you came out with a new product. It's not licensed." And I was like, "What are you talking about? I'm licensed on this other product." And they're like, and I'm like, "Well, how do I come out with new products?" And
Mm.
the lawyer's laughing at me. He's like, "Yeah, it's the chicken or the egg, right?" I'm like, "What are you talking about?"
Mm.
It's like
Mm.
it's like you're laughing at me trying to grow a business and I'm already licensed here, It's
Mm.
so I was like, screw this business. It's, let's axe that one. And then over time, I also realized that if I am spread out in these different ventures, I'm actually doing a disservice to my clients at the core business, and I'm doing a disservice to the employees that are employed there. I'm doing better for everybody, including them and myself, if I'm wholly focused on one venture.
Mm.
And so shed each of those, and that was easy after a while because you start looking at profit margins, right? And what for the time that you're putting into something, where's the biggest bang for the buck, the 80/20 principle. And that was all at the CPA firm. So it became an easier thing. But in your 20s, you got to entertain this stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, you gotta try it out. Talk about your philosophy of strategic laziness, which ironic given what we've talked about so far, you seem to not be lazy at all, but you have this
Well,
idea.
right. So that's all about busting your butt earlier in your career so you can sit under the palm tree later, right? I'm by nature a lazy person. I love being lazy and chilling, but I'm not going to be able to do that and actually relax unless I've built something of that can sustain itself that allows me to react to
Yeah.
relax,
Yeah.
otherwise it's just I'm still going. And so it's kind of like, I remember in relationships I was like, why are you doing all this stuff? Why are you working so hard? I was like, because I want to chill later. I've
Hmm.
got the energy now. I don't have kids now. I'm not married. I'm going to put in the work now, and now with a 3-year-old and a 1-year-old, man, I can't imagine starting my own CPA firm right
Yeah.
now and all
Oh
that
yeah.
it
With
takes
kids,
to
so
build
hard.
it up. Dude, like
Yeah.
after 5:30 right now, it's kid time and then put them to bed at 7:30. I'm exhausted.
Yeah. Tell me about it.
And
Um,
I'm up at 6:30, I can't.
how hard is it to run a company where you have so much changes in the market and tax strategy, and you have to keep abreast of all these things, and you have to worry about, oh, are we giving the client the accurate advice? Is last year's advice no longer good? We need to go back and tell all those clients. Like, how hard is it to run a company that, just thinking over the last 10, 12 years, how many changes there have been?
I think as accountants, tax professionals, you're kind of wired for it. That's just part of the game. That just is what it is. You're used to it. You've been trained in it in college, and you're just part of the expectation. Now, when you've got a whole bunch of flood of other things, um, you know, externally happening, it can be a lot, right? Like when COVID popped out, right? There's the triple P coming out, EIDL, the government funding. You're trying to how can I help my clients in getting this cash? All kinds of tax law changes in there. That was a lot.
Hmm.
That's where like in that May timeframe, June, you could see like we were all crashing, right? We had interpreted the triple P, how we can get everybody that cash, how they can be compliant. Then it was like it was mental health crisis. You know what I
Mm.
mean? Like a couple of our accountants, in tears.
Mm.
I'm crashing too because you're just running on adrenaline.
Because
Uh,
your clients are freaking out. They're all freaking
Hell
out, right?
yeah.
Yeah. Hmm.
Yeah, and like our revenues come from our clients. We got to help
Yeah.
them be able to stay
Yeah.
alive, stay afloat.
Yeah.
And so just right now, there's all kinds of. I think last night, just the new tax proposals came out. That's normal stuff. We're ready for that. You
Hmm.
know, it's all the other things that can happen simultaneously, tariffs throwing wrenches and stuff,
Hmm.
that started to get there, but
Yeah.
it seems like that hopefully will be, not such a thing, but you
So
know,
in 2021, you made the decision that you would relocate to Puerto Rico.
yeah.
Take us through that. What was that conversation like, making that decision?
Well, yeah, like so pre-COVID, I would regularly tell people I'd be an idiot to ever leave Atlanta. Money grows on trees, right? I'd
Mm.
created such roots, in Atlanta since being there since what, 2005. Um, and but then so during COVID, we went into North Georgia and really were, living at this kind of little vacation house to kind of get out of the city like a lot of people were doing. But we were in the middle of the woods,
Hmm.
and there got to a point, it's like, I can't live in the woods anymore,
Yeah.
And housing prices were super high everywhere in 2021, and so we looked all up and down the East Coast. And then I remember Puerto Rico, right? We always had this attachment to Puerto Rico and the Caribbean from growing up and our parents and stuff. And so we'd come down here for vacations, but we kind of, started to think about it a little bit more,
Hmm.
started looking at houses down here and they were much more affordable than the East Coast. And it's like, hey, let's scratch the itch. And I had a very unique childhood living on a boat. That's part of my identity. And I love the idea of our daughters being able to speak Spanglish and have a unique childhood that wasn't in, cul-de-sac Atlanta. And have this part of their identity kind of grown up and kind of let that, kind of take us where it is. And it's pretty cool. Like, my Spanish isn't nearly as good as my toddlers.
Yeah.
You rattle off anything in Spanish, like she's got it,
Yeah.
and she can respond back. And so that's super freaking cool
Yeah.
to kind of see. And so yeah, we're loving it, man. So yeah, my wife actually her company they did private equity and stuff. They actually acquired a big company here in Puerto Rico as well, like the same exact time we were moving. So she has an office to go into as well. So
Oh, got it.
yeah, it kind of all worked together.
And how you said that, previously you felt you'd be crazy to leave Atlanta because of your network there. So how did you avoid that handicapping you, or was there anything that you could do to try and preserve those relationships or maintain them from a distance?
Great question. So a couple years actually before COVID, we started to change our marketing and our targeting of our ideal clients nationwide, not just to Atlanta. So our customers were really coming in from everywhere. Um, because while Atlanta is chock full of our ideal target client, um, we was like, why are we only marketing to Atlanta? SEO, all this
Hmm.
kind of stuff. And so with that, that helped enable, us to feel more confident and just moving anywhere outside of Atlanta,
Hmm.
anywhere,
Hmm.
like, we were in Spain for 3 weeks after the tax deadline. I was doing some work from there,
Hmm.
in this post-COVID world where me and you are able to have an interview on Zoom. It's fantastic.
Yeah. 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 It I mean, after COVID, it made a lot of that kind of stuff
Yeah.
more popular or more possible. And if you could, in kind of a short, I'm sure you could talk for an hour about this, but the US government or Puerto Rican government has made it more tax advantageous to live in Puerto Rico. Can you explain why that is or how that works?
Yeah, like lots of reasons why, right? Any of these island countries, et cetera, there's a flight of talent, and so to attract talent and money back to the island, the government of Puerto Rico has a grant that you can apply for. And essentially, there's a bunch of rules. You got to buy a home within 2 years. Depending on revenue level, you have to employ people in Puerto Rico, et cetera. And then a whole bunch of different compliance pieces. But if you are granted the grant, then you're eligible for a 4% tax rate by Puerto Rico for the income that you receive from U.S. sources. So
Mm.
all of our clients are in the U.S. And so it just kind of works out it's called the Export Services Grant. So yeah, it just works out for our kind of company that we can be eligible for that tax rate.
And were you ever apprehensive about telling your clients that you moved to Puerto Rico, or were you open about that?
No, I mean it's going to be stapled on our website. I did a video kind of announcing it to our client base, and I mean this is kind of who I am.
Yeah.
I'm an entrepreneur. So it wasn't much doubt. I was just going to do it. I mean, at the end of the day, the business, any kind of business, it's a vehicle for you to live your passions, and live wherever you want, not necessarily to be beholden of what other people may think.
Yeah.
And so I kind of live by that.
Yeah. Um, I know that you posted something recently about you've changed your philosophy towards family-run businesses when you had kids.
Yeah.
It's interesting because my attitude towards that has evolved a little bit as well. I used to say like I'm never employing my kid in my company. Now I kind of like see some of the benefits of like bringing my kids in so that I can mentor them. I haven't yet, but I might still. So talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, we could talk for 5 hours just on that.
Yeah.
Well, like so in the golf company, I had a girlfriend that I was living with at the time help me out, and I would come home and ask where her timesheet was. And I ruined that relationship. I was
Uh,
micro learned that my default management style was that of a micromanager. And I have to protect myself, from that. When you say, "Hey, what are your strengths and weaknesses?" That's a weakness of mine,
mm,
right? So, that was one thing that kind of led me to say, "Hey, I don't want to mix business and personal relationships, family together because of how I operate, and sometimes I have a hard time turning it off. You know what I mean? If me and you were talking business, we could talk until midnight. You know what I mean?
mm-hmm.
on the weekends. And I didn't want to burn out my family from my entrepreneurial ways. I worked with my brother on a project at one time. It's not like that soured, but I had that kind of rule, you know. But then when I had the kids, I said, listen, this is a fake barrier, a fake wall, that I've got going on here. Um, I need to rethink how I'm operating there. And then I also looked at my client base. Every single one of our consulting clients are husband and wife operations. I just didn't even realize it.
Mm.
It just didn't slap me in the face. And a ton of our clients are working with parents, siblings, etc. And so I was like, I got to rethink how I am approaching the kind of family business dynamic. And I really want to understand how to do it successfully, you know. Um, and so now it's in this book writing journey on family businesses, whether it's a generation one, wealth creator kind of family, or inheritor family, maybe a Gen 2, Gen 3, or Gen 4. How are we doing it? How are people doing it successfully? Integrating or showing kids, their children, their family members, what's going on in the business without burning them out. How does communication happen? I can tell you all my own family retreats, like me and my wife do a quarterly retreat, are way better.
Mm.
From ripping this Band-Aid off,
You're
our
not
last.
asking your wife for her timesheet.
Well, dude, correct. Yes, without without and going anywhere close to that. But it was funny, like our me and my wife's little quarterly retreat that we just had. I had our agenda. It was 2.5 hours. We were in Spain, had some inspirational music, to start it off. It was fun, but they just get better and better because we look at, what's our vision aligned, for the family. I do it with my business, separate with our leadership team, but we also do it with the family too.
Hmm.
It's kind of phase two. We consult with our business clients to get them profitable and delegate, have the right team members. And then we move to the family agenda and just getting aligned on the vision for the family and the kids and where we want to live and what our values are. And then hopefully phase three is then bringing the kids into the picture too, right? Like, how do we want to expose them to the family business? How do we want to talk about wealth, passing it down? How do you want to talk about budgeting, et cetera, without just passing down a trust fund blindly with no really communication of, what your vision is and your relationship with money is?
Hmm.
Not a lot of CPAs are having this kind of conversation,
Mm.
but as I kind of said, I get into things because I want to tackle this topic for me
Yeah.
personally. And then, I like to share that with our clients as well. Who's up for that? Not everybody's up for that kind of conversation. It's very hands-on.
Right, right. Yeah, it's interesting. I grew up in a pretty affluent suburban community, and I feel like I was exposed to a lot of situations where there wasn't great communication and wealth was not passed down in a good way, and the next generation, like higher generation, first generation worked their butts off, and then the next generation was lazy, that not strategically lazy, but just straight lazy.
Yeah.
But I'd be curious to know, like statistically, I mean, you always hear about like kind of generations uplifting, so probably that's more anecdotal. I imagine there's probably more families that are teaching the next generation wealth building skills and business building skills, and maybe we just kind of see examples of where a next generation hasn't taken those lessons to heart, and they kind of stand out in our mind, or at least in my mind.
Yeah, I think there are definitely stats there I don't have absolutely memorized, but I think by the fourth generation of the wealth creator, 3% of the time the wealth is still been stewarded, shepherded, and exists. And then the third generation is like 13%, second generation is like 70%. I might have those a little bit off, but as time goes on, the communication um dissipates. It's not as good
Mm,
statistically. And I think that's kind of, that's what I'm trying to address for my own family. And then, try to trickle it down to our client base as well.
yeah. Well, that's a cool mission, and I'm glad you're working on that book. I'm excited to see it when it comes out. Well, Trevor, this has been great. Where can people go to learn more about you, connect with you, and maybe keep tabs of this book when it comes out?
Yeah, 100% LinkedIn, Trevor McCandless, two C's, two S's. You can find me on LinkedIn. FusionTaxes.com is our website. Those are the spots that hit me, or Twitter, X, or at Atlanta Taxes. That's another spot to hit me up.
Excellent, Trevor. Thanks so much.
All right, brother.
Thanks for listening to the Smart Business Revolution podcast. We'll see you again next time, and be sure to click subscribe to get future episodes.